I'm a princess with nothing but dirty thoughts in my head. Every day I just eat and watch men work out. Everyone in the palace calls me a good-for-nothing, but they don't know that I'm actually a transmigrator. In order to spoil me rotten, the Empress indulges me in every possible way. Every meal features state banquet-level braised deer tendon. Liu Ruyan stands by drooling with envy. The Empress won't even let him touch it. When I don't want to go to the study, she lets me sleep until high noon, and even serves the most expensive calming incense. I offhandedly said I liked the fourth princess's red jade hairpin, and she slapped her own daughter right on the spot to snatch the hairpin and give it to me. The fourth princess brought her test papers to humiliate me. You idiot. Do you really think mother spoils you because she wants to spoil you rotten? So you'll never be able to get married? I gnawed on a grape tribute from the western regions and laughed. Whether I get married or not is none of my business. I transmigrated here to enjoy life, not to suffer and learn those ridiculous rules. Seeing her naive expression, I patted her shoulder. Have you ever seen a princess who couldn't get married? Liu Ruyan was clearly stunned. Your face is all red as you try to refute me. Even if that is true, you won't find a good husband. Anyone with any real ability would look down on you. You idiot, just wait to rot away in this palace. Liu Ruyan angrily cursed me out before storming off. Bully me, will you? I'm not someone to be trifled with. That night, I went to find the Empress. My eyes welled up with tears, wearing a look of total heartbreak. Mother fourth sister says that everything you do for me is just an act, meant to spoil me rotten. I have always believed that mother truly cared for me, but fourth sister's words are truly chilling. The Empress was furious upon hearing this, and then, right in front of me, she slapped Liu Ruyan twice, hard, calling her an idiot. Liu Ruyan started out by desperately arguing back, insisting that I am just a notorious, unmarriageable idiot. You brainless fool. Get to the study and reflect on your behavior. For a whole month, you are not to step foot outside. The Empress was trembling with rage. After punishing her own daughter, she sat down beside me with a forced smile. I popped the last piece of fruit into my mouth, and feigning innocence said, Mother Empress, you've always pampered me, ever since my own mother passed away. It is only natural that fourth sister feels resentful. Perhaps you should be stricter with me in the future. Otherwise, fourth sister will continue to talk nonsense, claiming that you're raising me to be useless. The Empress quickly reassured me, Chinger, dear, don't listen to your fourth sister's ramblings. A woman's greatest virtue is her lack of talent. You are the little princess with the most noble blood in this palace. Who would dare criticize you? I would certainly punish them. Rest assured, mother will surely find you a perfect husband one day. Why should we suffer, learning all those useless things? I hung my head and remained silent. The Empress was growing anxious. She was truly terrified that what Liu Ruyan said today would reach the Emperor's ears. To appease me, she gave me several more chests of gold and jewelry. I didn't want to accept them, but I feared my sister would say I was holding a grudge against our mother. Then I would never be able to clear my name, even if I jumped into the Yellow River. The Empress exhausted every kind word she had, and only felt at ease once the gifts were delivered to my quarters. A few days later, for the Empress Dowager's birthday, Liu Ruyan was released early. The Empress hired the best matron in the palace to teach Liu Ruyan proper etiquette. Even late at night, I could still hear Liu Ruyan's screams from next door. Princess Liu Ruyan. When you walk, your arms must be held straight. One side just dipped slightly. The matron corrected her, and without a hint of hesitation, struck Liu Ruyan's arm with a wooden ruler. It made such a crisp sound. It made me wince just listening to it. Soon, the Empress Dowager's birthday arrived. Liu Ruyan, having healed, had already forgotten the pain, came to show off to me. Tomorrow is the Empress Dowager's birthday. Mother says all the royal siblings will be tested in public. I understood her meaning. She is just waiting to see me make a fool of myself. What exactly will we be tested on? I asked, feigning curiosity. There is a special poetry banquet this year. Besides the royal children, the children of dukes and officials are invited too. I heard Han Yusheng will be there too. General Han Yusheng's eldest son, talented in both arts and warfare. He is famous throughout the capital. I narrowed my eyes craftily. I gave a perfunctory response. It seems the fourth sister is quite fond of this young General Han. Having had her intentions exposed by me suddenly, Liu Ruyan instantly blushed. I do like him. So what? I reminded Liu Ruyan. I heard a while ago that you were secretly having people look into that young General Han's birth data. The second sister isn't just a master of poetry, she is also an expert at riding and archery. She would be a very good match for the young general. At least I still have a chance to compete. Liu Ruyan failed to get a rise out of me and left in a huff after saying that the Emperor's birthday is a national celebration. I was woken up by my personal maid early in the morning. Princess Falling is here to help you get dressed. It took nearly an hour to get ready. As soon as I stepped outside, I saw Liu Ruyan waiting at the gates of Kuning Palace. Liu Ruyan looked quite smug, and her crimson brocade dress was rather garish. If you slept any longer, little sister, I'm afraid you'd have missed the appointed time. Mother specifically instructed me to accompany you and guide you at any time, so as not to embarrass yourself before grandmother. Sorry to have kept you waiting so long, fourth sister. I smiled slightly, not bothering to expose her petty intentions. Liu Ruyan held her head high as she walked with me, but as we walked, she began to annoy me. She started trying to annoy me. Little sister, you're walking too fast. You should breathe with every step. Your arms are held too low. They should be held level. Hands turned outward like this. You really are a disgrace looking like that. As she spoke, Liu Ruyan began to cover her mouth and mock me. I smiled as well, stepped closer, and asked, are the wounds from the nanny's beating finally healed? Liu Ruyan was momentarily speechless, her face turning beet red. I walked a few steps, then remembered something. I paused. Oh, I almost forgot to remind you. Every night I can hear some ghost-like wailing coming from next door. It gives me a headache every day. I suppose fourth sister can hear it too, right? I still have plenty of soothing incense given to me by mother. I'll have Fuling send some over to you later. After all, this is something you don't come across very often. Walking to the signing palace, a concubine a few steps away cast a disdainful look at me. So that's Princess Luoyao. She is just as the rumors say, completely lacking in etiquette. I've heard she is a wild child, gluttonous and lazy, relying on the Empress. Not even the palace can discipline her. So you're just going to say I'm ill-mannered then? I felt a bit angry. Saying you're ill-mannered is a compliment. Even the wild ones are better than you. Hump. It's only because the Empress is kind-hearted that she tolerates you. If you were so rude in my quarters, I would have skinned you alive, himp. Without giving them time to react, I slapped them both across the face. You two had better show some restraint. The rules in the palace are strict. If you keep acting up, it won't just be your faces that hurt. The two of them clearly hadn't expected me to strike. How dare you, you crazy girl. You actually dared to hit me. You dare to cause a scene in front of the Empress Dowager's palace. Guards, come quickly. Seize her, I said coldly. An ancient saying goes, if a child is not taught, the fault lies with the father. You gossip that I lack upbringing. Are you implying that the emperor is at fault? You dare to speak ill of the emperor behind his back. A slap is getting off lightly. What nonsense are you spouting? Everyone in the palace knows you're an ill-mannered wild girl. It is clearly your own lack of ambition. His Majesty is occupied with state affairs. How would he have the time to discipline you? The concubine hurriedly explained. I have been by the Empress's side since I was young. My bond with her is profound. You dare to slander my mother, trying to sow discord between us? Tell me, what is your motive? I continued to press them. I didn't. The two concubines stammered, unable to speak. When the head eunuch serving before the palace arrived in a hurry, you two have entered the palace and have supposedly been taught the rules. To dare to make such a scene before the Palace of Compassion and Tranquility, you should know the consequences. Today is Her Majesty the Empress Dowager's birthday. Are you deliberately trying to ruin her mood? Hearing this, the two concubines' faces turned pale, and they hurriedly lowered their heads to explain. Chief eunuch, this was not our intention. This wild girl started it first. The chief eunuch's gaze hardened. I'll keep this in mind for now as I glare at you both. If anyone dares to cause trouble today and disturbs the Empress Dowager, then do not blame me for being unkind. The two concubines quickly agreed, swallowing their pride. The chief eunuch looked at me and said kindly, Princess Luoyao, please hurry inside. Her Majesty the Empress Dowager was thinking of you this morning. At this moment, Liu Ruyan also caught up and walked up to me with a lecturing tone. You really managed to cause trouble the moment I step away. Just wait to be punished for this later. Your Highness, this way please. The chief eunuch led the way to the main hall of the palace, mimicking Liu Ruyan's manner. Lowering my head, I stepped into the hall to bow and offer birthday greetings. May grandmother's fortune be as vast as the Eastern Sea, and your lifespan span for 10,000 years. The Empress Dowager sat upright on her throne, her face full of kindness, as she bade us rise and take our seats. Liu Ruyan stood up and knelt down once more to pay her respects. Grandmother, above all, Warner has specially requested a golden pillar Manjushri Bodhisattva for you, hoping that the Bodhisattva will bless you with good health and eternal youth. This forced me, having just stood up, to kneel right back down again. Sitting nearby, the Empress hurriedly spoke up for her daughter. Warner these past few days knelt for 3 days and 3 nights at Daxiangguo Temple to specially request it for you. The Empress Dowager smiled lovingly. Warner, you have a good heart. Liu Ruyan, hearing the Empress Dowager's praise, felt a bit proud of herself. She then looked toward me and spoke up, "Little sister, you should bring out the birthday gift you prepared for grandmother." I didn't react for a moment, but the Empress, seemingly very understanding, stepped in to smooth things over. "Mother, Chinger may have simply forgotten, but she still thinks of you often." I stood up. "Chinger has specially made a painting for grandmother, wishing grandmother a life as long as the southern mountains." With that said, Falling walked in with her head lowered, holding a scroll. But when I personally unrolled the painting for everyone to see, everyone's eyes widened in surprise. "This painting is excellent." The Empress Dowager finally spoke. Chief Steward Qi, who was serving nearby, smiled and announced loudly, "Princess Luoyao presents a peerless work of art." Liu Ruyan looked at this painting of the 10,000-year pine on the southern mountain and was stunned. At this moment, Liu Ruyan pointed at my painting with unconcealed jealousy. "This painting is simply too unsightly to behold." I paused in my tracks. As soon as Liu Ruyan's words left her lips, the Empress Dowager's expression turned stern, and the Empress felt a tremor in her heart. "Insolent, get out of my sight." Immediately, the Empress knelt to beg for forgiveness. "Empress Dowager, please forgive us. Wanner is young and foolish. She didn't mean any harm. It was just nonsense." Liu Ruyan was still arguing. "This painting is dark and dirty. It's just a cheap imitation, a poor attempt at art. There is no brushwork to speak of, nor any artistic spirit or charm. To bring this out is an insult to the Empress Dowager and all the consorts." I smiled. "If that is how you feel, then let us burn it." After speaking, I tossed the scroll directly into the brazier at the entrance, before anyone could react. The world's first charcoal sketch was set ablaze. Liu Ruyan's eyes widened, seemingly full of pity. "No matter how poor the quality, it was a birthday gift for the Empress Dowager. You actually burned it." But soon, the smiles in their eyes began to vanish. The painting in the brazier turned to ash in an instant, leaving behind only the pine tree still remarkably lifelike. The flickering green flames made the pine tree look as if it were alive. The entire hall fell into a deathly silence. The Empress Dowager rubbed her aging eyes, muttering to herself, "Did I just see a living pine tree?" Head Steward Qi scrambled to his knees, exclaiming, "A miracle from the Bodhisattva, a divine omen of the pine. May the Empress Dowager live 10,000 years, and may her life be boundless." Everyone else, regardless of what they truly thought, hastily knelt in submission. "May the Empress Dowager live 10,000 years, and may her life be boundless." As I knelt down, I heard the Empress Dowager laughing with joy. "Chinger is truly my lucky star. Come, sit beside me." The expressions of the Empress and the others shifted instantly. As the Empress Dowager spoke, she slipped a bracelet from her own wrist. "I grant this to you. It suits you, Chinger." The Empress Dowager placed it on my wrist herself. Head Steward Qi hurried to brief me. "This golden phoenix bracelet has been with the Empress Dowager for over a decade. Princess, why don't you offer your thanks?" "Your Highness, why don't you thank Her Majesty?" I knelt and rattled off a string of auspicious blessings. The Empress Dowager was delighted, her joy only growing. Liu Ruyan, however, turned livid. I obediently followed a maid to a seat below. The banquet began at noon. The Empress led the concubines toward the banquet hall. Liu Ruyan and I followed behind them. On the way there, Liu Ruyan kept her arms held stiffly, nudging me every now and then. "If you have something to say, just say it." Seeing her hesitate, unable to find the right words, I broke the silence first. "Who did you get to make that painting?" "I painted it myself, just for fun." I was telling the truth. Liu Ruyan wanted to argue back, but she clearly held herself back. "Then go back and paint another one for me to see." "Want to learn?" I asked in return. Liu Ruyan deliberately kept a straight face, nodding her head with a stiff neck. "If you want to learn, then you have to beg me." I laughed and took long strides, speeding up, leaving Liu Ruyan to stomp her foot in anger. Since I'd woken up this morning, I hadn't had a chance to eat anything, not bothering to maintain any sort of image. I started scarfing down the food. Liu Ruyan, on the other hand, was chatting away with the other princesses, intentionally isolating me. Liu Ruyan shot me a look of pure disdain as she glanced my way a few times. "Look at you. If people didn't know better, they'd think mother didn't feed you at home." Liu Ruyan threw that sour remark at me. I gave her a perfunctory reply. "That's not true at all. This venison comes from the wild deer of East Peak Mountain, and this twin spot snapper is exceptionally delicious." Liu Ruyan gestured to the delicacies before us, trying to show off her knowledge to me. This fish is indeed quite fresh. I've had it a few times. It tastes pretty good. You only care about eating. Let me tell you, this fish comes from the South Sea. It's rare for ordinary people to even see it. So, Have you had it before? I asked back. Liu Ruyan picked up a piece of fish with her chopsticks, then reluctantly put it back down, still putting on a brave face. I can't even be bothered to eat it. I eat it too often, so I find it a bit greasy. Take advantage of grandmother's birthday banquet. It is rare for you to get a taste of this, little sister. Make sure to eat plenty. Don't be shy. She was trying so hard to save face, while drooling at the sight of it. I couldn't even be bothered to call her bluff. About 2 hours later, fully wined and dined, the princes and princesses began performing for the Empress Dowager to wish her long life. When it was Liu Ruyan's turn, she had been prepared for a long time and walked gracefully into the hall. Liu Ruyan first played a piece on the rowan, then danced gracefully while holding the instrument. After the performance, Liu Ruyan gave me a triumphant smile. Finally, it was my turn. Before I even stepped onto the stage, Liu Ruyan mocked me first. Little sister, why don't you skip it and avoid making a fool of yourself, lest you embarrass the royal family? We haven't seen Chinger's talents yet. Today we finally have the chance to see them. Don't be nervous, Chinger, even if you aren't prepared. Why don't you just go up and kowtow a few more times to grandmother? That can count as showing your filial piety. Several princesses started with the sarcasm, waiting to see me make a fool of myself. Since you are all so expectant, dear sisters, then I shall show my lack of talent. After I said that, I stood up as if to perform. Liu Ruyan bit her lip gently, and for some reason she tugged at me. You truly have no shame. Are you really going up there to make a fool of yourself? Liu Ruyan tried to stop me. Is my fourth sister worried about me? I lowered my head and teased her with a question. Liu Ruyan's gaze darted away. It doesn't matter if you embarrass yourself, but can you bear the responsibility if you implicate the Empress and ruin her reputation? Oh, then it is fine. You are truly ungrateful. Seeing that I wouldn't listen to reason, Liu Ruyan cursed in a fit of rage. Once I stood in the center of the hall, the palace examiner inquired, Princess Luoyao, what is your talent? I finally spoke up. Grandmother, father, may you be in good health and peace. Your daughter is untalented, but I shall make a fool of myself to entertain you. Just as I was about to strike a pose, I felt something was missing in my hands. Seeing a man in white nearby, holding a folding fan, I stepped forward to ask, kind sir, might I borrow your paper fan? Princess Luoyao, please feel free. The man in white smiled slightly and presented the fan to me. I returned his smile and took it from him. Snap! I gave it a sharp flick, and the folding fan closed with a crisp sound. Then, centering my chi in my dantian, I suddenly began to speak. It is said, in the eastern continent of superior joy, by the seaside, or rather within the sea itself, there stands a famous mountain, called the Mountain of Flowers and Fruit. I imitated the storytelling style of old Master Shan that I heard in my childhood, with dramatic gestures, and began the tale of Journey to the West. At first, everyone in the hall furrowed their brows when they saw me start to tell a story. But as for the arts of the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting, I don't know much about those anyway. Following my memory, I was barely able to recount the first few chapters of Journey to the West in a vivid manner, especially when I told of Sun Wukong learning under Patriarch Bodhi and mastering the 72 transformations. Liu Ruyan beside me couldn't help but exclaim, I really wish I had a monkey that could transform. I continued with my storytelling. The people in the hall had long since moved past their initial disdain and were gradually drawn in by the plot. After about an hour, I was parched from speaking. When I reached the part where the Heavenly Court dispatched 100,000 heavenly soldiers to conquer Flower Fruit Mountain, and Yang Jian battled Sun Wukong, I stopped. And then what? Summoning asked. I cleared my throat. If you wish to know what happens next, you must wait for the next installment. Being a cliffhanger expert felt so good. That mischievous monkey is truly interesting. Chinger, you tell a good story. Even I felt energized listening to it. As soon as the Empress Dowager spoke, the concubines who were just chirping away and begging me to continue all shut their mouths. At this moment, the emperor coughed twice on purpose and commanded, Princess Luoyao tells a fine story. Write it down once you return and send it to the Empress Dowager to help her pass the time. What else could I do? I had no choice but to agree. Liu Ruyan, sitting to one side, kept looking at me, then intentionally turning her head away. Finally, Liu Ruyan couldn't hold it in any longer. She nudged me with her elbow. Hey, little sister, that story you just told, which script did you find it in? I glanced at Liu Ruyan. Suddenly, I had an idea. Want to know? How about I tell you more later? Upon hearing this, the princesses sitting nearby all pricked up their ears to listen. Liu Ruyan nodded vigorously. Today is grandmother's birthday banquet. It is not the right time for rowdiness. I'll tell you another day, and you can write it down. Then take it to show grandmother. That will be a great merit for you. I tried to guide her. Liu Ruyan looked suspicious. You, being this kind. I'm just looking for some free labor. What kind of kindness could that be? Well, you know, my handwriting, I'm afraid it would be an eyesore for grandmother. I'll have to ask you to do it for me. I spoke the truth. At these words, Liu Ruyan lifted her swan-like neck. At least you know your place. Your writing is indeed atrocious, unfit for a royal desk. In return for you calling me fourth sister, I suppose I shall record it for you. Then it is settled. I don't know how much time passed before Liu Ruyan shook me awake. Little sister, if the emperor and empress see you sleeping here so greedily, there will surely be a punishment. Get up quickly and come with me. The Wengsing terrace is already bustling. I walked outside following Liu Ruyan and the others. As for the Wengsing Terrace, it had gathered talented scholars visiting for the birthday. Once we arrived, I finally understood. So it was a poetry competition. As a princess, with such a unique status, I rarely appear in public. We went straight to the second floor of the Wengsing Pavilion. Liu Ruyan was holding the birthday poem, written by Han Yusheng, the scholar from the capital, tonight, reading it over and over again. The princess snorted coldly, clearly showing hostility. Very soon, a new theme was announced. The theme was "Do." Sisters, how about we join in on this topic? The eldest princess suggested, and the second princess and the others readily agreed. Liu Ruyan gazed at Han Yusheng down below, her face filled with infatuation, so she naturally had no objections. The second princess was particularly skilled at poetry. In less time than it takes to burn half an incense stick, she had already finished her poem. The other princesses did not want to be outdone, especially Liu Ruyan, who deliberated over every single word and phrase, putting in extra effort. Once finished, the princesses critiqued each other's work, while the eunuchs waiting nearby made copies of them and hurriedly delivered them down to the poetry competition's judging panel. On any other day, Liu Ruyan would never have passed up such an opportunity to mock me. Perhaps she was still hoping I would tell her stories. She just gave me a look of disgust. Instead, the second princess criticized the poem Liu Ruyan had just written, saying it relied too heavily on flowery language and forced emotion, lacking true artistic depth. Liu Ruyan was naturally unwilling to accept this, and the two nearly started arguing. As they went on, the second princess turned her focus toward me. Princess Luoyao, why don't you compose one? Could it be that you spend all day reading nothing but those low-class trashy novels? I am shallow in learning, and naturally dare not show off in front of my sisters. I do not wish to argue with her. Ha! Lacking in talent and learning. Indeed, I fear you can barely read a single word. Truly, what kind of courtyard raises what kind of person? The second princess was relentless. What are you babbling about? Do you dare me to go and tell the empress right now? Liu Ruyan was instantly infuriated. Isn't it obvious? The youngest sister here cannot even compose a complete poem. Could it be that the empress is intentionally indulging her? The second princess sneered. These words were truly cutting, leaving Liu Ruyan speechless. I felt a lump in my throat, distressed. Unable to help myself, I stepped forward and looked toward the second princess. Who says I cannot compose poetry? You? That is truly hilarious. Have you heard some silly nursery rhyme? And now you wish to show it off. The second princess burst into laughter. She completely disregarded me. Liu Ruyan tugged at me, intending to give me an out. Those of us from the Palace of Earthly Tranquility do not need to prove anything to anyone else. The second princess was certain that I could not produce any coherent poetry. She did not hide her disdain at all, spouting every cruel thing that came to mind. I endured for a moment, but the more I thought, the angrier I became. I picked up my brush and wrote. The second princess and the others immediately gathered around. At a single glance, the second princess laughed until she doubled over. One drop, another drop, and yet another drop. 3 drops, 4 drops, 5 or 6 drops, 7 drops, 8 drops, 9 or 10 drops. Ha ha ha. The second princess recited it while laughing. The other princesses nearby could not help themselves either and burst into stifled laughter. Not only that, the second princess ordered her personal maid to have the poem I was currently writing sent down to the poetry gathering below. Using her authority as a princess, she had it delivered directly into the hands of Huang Chengji, the dean of Bailu Academy. And so, before I had even finished writing the poem, Huang Chengji made my work public. I have just received a poem from Princess Luoyao. I find it quite amusing, so I shall share it with you all to add some levity. to today's poetry gathering. Then, as soon as I had written 3 lines, the scholars and young ladies at the gathering below burst into laughter. I had long heard that little Princess Luoyao's approach to poetry was unique. This is truly something else. Haha, this poem is so catchy. Even a child could recite it. It will surely be passed down for ages. The mocking chatter about me, fanned by the second princess's cohort, became increasingly intense. There is still 1 line left. She surely hasn't run out of numbers. Not knowing how to continue, has she? In my opinion, 1,000 drops, 10,000, 10 million drops would be most fitting. Haha. Liu Ruyan had originally wanted to stop me, but she never expected I would actually dare to write poetry, and was now trembling with rage. And so, as soon as I finished the final line, Liu Ruyan, in a fury, snatched the rice paper from the desk, not even bothering to glance at the crooked handwriting, and threw it out from behind the curtain. Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough? Liu Ruyan was seething. If you ask me, from now on, any poetry from the Kuning palaces should be ignored, so as not to offend our eyes. The second princess laughed even more wantonly. Just then, the rice paper Liu Ruyan had thrown out was caught by one of the scholars at the academy, and shouting aloud, "It is here! It is here! The final line of Princess Luoyao's masterpiece. Let me read it for everyone. This final line is..." They saw. The student unfolded the rice paper. After barely making out the characters, his breath hitched. The mocking smile he had worn just moments ago slowly froze over. When the sun rises in the east, it is hard to find. This final line. It is a stroke of pure genius, absolutely magnificent. As the student excitedly recited the entire poem aloud, the sounds of laughter and mockery vanished into thin air instantly. The scene went so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Dean Huang Chengji was also flushed with embarrassment. At this moment, the other deans, after discussing among themselves, awarded this poem a top-tier rating. Among them, a man in white. His refined face stirred slightly. He couldn't help but look toward the second floor and remarked, "Princess Luoyao has a truly unique insight into poetry. In just a few words, she has captured the essence of morning dew perfectly. She has the talent of a prodigy." National teacher Ji is absolutely right. The final line takes a sudden brilliant turn, like seeing the bright moon after the clouds part. It is refreshingly original. In your opinion, national teacher Ji, of all the poems on the theme of dew, which one takes the top spot? Jiqi's lips moved slightly as he pointed to the rice paper in his hand. It must be this one. Soon, the time for an incense stick had passed. The top 3 poems were hung up for all to see on the second floor. The second princess and the others were still sneering. I glanced at the 3 top-tier poems that had just been raised, seeing my half-nursery rhyme, half-doggerel poem placed in the center at the top spot. I smiled. I looked at the second princess and asked, "You said my poem was crude and awful?" The second princess hadn't yet noticed the situation below. She retorted dismissively, "It is more than just crude. It's enough to make people laugh until their jaws drop. You're likely worse than a village peasant woman." Oh, I couldn't help but laugh. You say I'm worse than a village woman. Correct. To say you even write poetry is an insult to poetry itself. The second princess was eager to drag me through the mud. Liu Ruyan tried to pull me away, but I brushed past her and pulled back the curtain behind me. On the wall directly across from us were the top-tier poems and literary works displayed for the evening, and among the poems about dew just hung up, mine was clearly displayed in the top row. Open your eyes and look closely. The very poem you called crude and vulgar has been rated as superior by more than a dozen highly respected scholars. Do you think those old masters on the dais are inferior to you, or that they are all blind, or what? You keep insisting that my poem is worse than a village woman's. Doesn't that mean that those scholars and talented men below are also worse than a farm wife? The second princess kept her eyes fixed on that last line, her face turning beet red. How is this possible? The other princesses savored the lines, especially the last line of my poem, and began coming over to apologize to me. Younger sister is truly talented, using such simple words to create such a masterful work. This is what the masters call great wisdom appearing foolish. The way of great simplicity. Little sister's poetic talent is truly admirable. I simply nodded in response. Liu Ruyan, on the other hand, clapped her hands in applause without any pretense. Especially seeing the second princess look so thwarted, she felt exceptionally satisfied. Haha, my mother, the Empress, often instructs my younger sister in poetry, so she can just toss off a poem like this and wipe the floor with those who think they're so superior. And the second sister actually prides herself on her poetry. How laughable. My younger sister wrote this just for fun, yet it is still better than yours. Have your dozen years of poetic study all just been wasted? Finally finding her chance, Liu Ruyan wouldn't let the second princess off the hook. All the resentment she had held back before was now fully returned. The second princess choked for a long time, not daring to critique my poem any further. Hump. Go ahead and be smug. Let's see if you'll still be laughing tomorrow. The second princess turned and stomped off in a rage. I watched the poems with Liu Ruyan for a while longer, but then sleepiness began to creep in. I'm feeling a bit tired. Fourth sister, you continue enjoying the poetry. I'm going to take my leave now. Oh, little sister, stay and have more fun. Look, Han Yusheng is composing again. This Song of the Bright Moon is a poem about pining and longing. Do you think it might be written for me? He has been glancing over at us this whole time. I suppose so. I left. Liu Ruyan knew my temperament. Tonight, I had once again saved face for the Empress, so her tone toward me was much more pleasant. After descending the stairs and leaving the Wengsing Terrace, I felt only the cool breeze of the night. I wandered aimlessly through the garden, walking on and on, until I saw a figure standing ahead, a long white robe, a slender, upright build. As I drew closer, he looked somewhat familiar. Greetings, Princess Luoyao. This man in white was the very same fellow from the banquet today, who had lent me his folding fan. If you wander around the palace and the imperial guards see you, you'll likely be punished. I kindly warned him. If being punished means seeing Princess Luoyao, I would gladly accept it. He stared at me longingly as he spoke. I smiled, taking 2 large strides forward. Are you interested in me? Just wait a while. Once I move into my princess manor outside the palace, I wouldn't mind taking you in. To be honest, your looks really struck a chord with me. As someone from the modern age, could I really be charmed by a handsome young man like you? After speaking, I teased him intentionally, giving him a flirtatious wink. I walked past him with big strides. After I left, an old eunuch hurried over. Your Excellency, Great Master, you have been hard to find. His Majesty is waiting for you in the imperial study. Please, let me lead the way. The next day, I slept until I woke up naturally. Liu Ruyan came to find me early on, bringing pastries from the imperial kitchen. Little sister, the Empress Mother said you like these osmanthus cakes, so she had them made fresh this morning. With that, she set the pastries on the table. Let me have a bite to eat first. I took a piece of the osmanthus cake to taste. Liu Ruyan wanted to urge me further, but she eventually held it back. She reminded me of grandmother, acting rather peevish. You were talking about that mischievous monkey's story last night. I wonder if she is waiting anxiously. I laughed. You really are impatient. At this hour, grandmother should be napping, so it is not good to disturb her. There is no need to rush. Saying this, Liu Ruyan finally fell silent. About half an hour later, after finishing my meal, I went to the study, then reclined on the daybed, eating fruit. And continuing with the next chapters of 40 Cerny to the West IT, Liu Ruyan was listening intently, and her writing speed was quite fast. I don't know how much time had passed when a frantic shout from outside interrupted my train of thought. Your Highness, something terrible has happened. Liu Ruyan, who had been sitting properly, frowned instantly, evidently quite annoyed. Then, a figure dressed as a palace maid burst in hurriedly. The person who arrived was Shueping, Liu Ruyan's personal maid. You insolent thing, who gave you permission to come in here and scream? If you ever act so unruly again, see if I don't break your legs. Liu Ruyan stood up and scolded her severely, terrifying poor Shueping, who knelt on the floor, her face deathly pale. I took a sip of tea to moisten my throat. To be this anxious, it must be something serious. Let's hear what she has to say first. Liu Ruyan then ordered. Why aren't you thanking my little sister for pleading for you? Speak quickly, what on earth has you in such a panic? Thank you, little princess. Your Highness. Shueping looked at me with gratitude and bowed her head twice more. The emperor just issued an imperial decree stating that you are to be married off to the Xianbei kingdom. The wedding is to be held at the start of next month. This news was like a bolt from the blue. Liu Ruyan couldn't steady her feet, and her face turned instantly white. I'm going to see the Empress Mother. I would rather die than marry into that land of savages. Tears gushed from Liu Ruyan's eyes as she ran out crying. I also sat up. Yesterday at the banquet, I had seen the Xianbei envoys from afar. If the emperor has already issued the decree, no matter how much Liu Ruyan throws a fit, it is likely that the situation cannot be reversed. I had fallen take the notes of what Liu Ruyan recorded and report it to the Empress Dowager. And where is the Empress? See what news you can find as well. It didn't take long. Falling came running back. Upon asking her, I learned that the Prince of Xianbei specifically requested to marry Liu Ruyan. It was said he was captivated by her dancing yesterday. Involuntarily, I thought back to last night. And the second princess's parting words, enjoy yourself now. Let's see if you can still laugh tomorrow. Liu Ruyan must be frantic by now. I thought I should go check on her. With that in mind, I headed to the Empress's bedchamber. Sure enough, from far away, I could already hear Liu Ruyan's wailing. It was hysterical. Upon entering, I saw Liu Ruyan slumped on the floor, weeping uncontrollably. There were visible palm prints on her face. Liu Ruyan shrieked hoarsely, "Mother, won't you please plead with father for me again? I beg you. I truly do not want to be married off to the Xianbei. Ever since I was little, you made me study poetry and literature, so I could become a talented woman. I never dared to slack off for even a moment. I was always the first to arrive at the study, waiting for the teacher to arrive. You said that as a princess, I had to master the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Even if I didn't like it, I studied diligently. When I was slow, you watched the nannies beat me, and I didn't dare utter a sound. But do you know how much that ring hurt when it hit my skin? It stung like fire. I couldn't even lie down to sleep. It was so cold in winter. My hands would be swollen with frostbite. Yet, I was still punished if my calligraphy wasn't perfect. When learning to dance, I bruised my knees and sprained my ankles, but I didn't dare complain, just biting my teeth to keep practicing. You said that to be honored in public, one must endure the bitterest of hardships, saying that only with such diligence, you'd be able to find a good husband and wouldn't bring shame upon the royal family. But what about now? Father is sending me to marry into the Xianbei. Mother, please, say something. If I leave, I'll never see you again. Does your heart not ache at all? The Empress sat straight on her divan, her face rigid, revealing no emotion whatsoever. Only after Liu Ruyan shrieked, until she was breathless and hoarse, did the Empress speak in a cold tone. As a daughter of the royal house, you must be prepared to sacrifice yourself for the sake of the dynasty. Your father's decree must be followed, even if it means you die on Xianbei soil. Liu Ruyan was completely devastated. Her gaze turned cold, almost like that of a stranger. Then she looked at me and laughed at herself. You're here to see me make a fool of myself, aren't you? Father doesn't want me. Mother doesn't care for me either. I was born to lead this wretched life. Sometimes I truly envy you. You don't have to wake up early. You don't have to study those mind-numbing things. And you don't have to do needlework, pricking your fingers until they bleed. Heh. A good-for-nothing. I also want to be a good-for-nothing, living freely every day, doing whatever I want, no matter how vicious people's words are. They never hurt as much as a whip across the skin. Having said that, Liu Ruyan walked away, supported by Shueping. The final look she gave me was utterly lifeless. After Liu Ruyan left, I looked at the Empress and asked, is there really no way to change this? The Empress's rigid expression finally collapsed, her mask falling away. Tears flowed down her cheeks uncontrollably. No. His Majesty has already issued the decree, agreeing to the marriage alliance. Unless that Xianbei prince dies, even if the heavens were to fall, Wanner must marry him. As she spoke, the Empress burst into tears. In just a brief moment, she looked noticeably older. I stepped forward to support her and said calmly, looking at her, then just let that Xianbei prince die. That way, fourth sister won't have to marry him. The Empress was clearly shocked by my words, but soon her eyes sharpened. Looking as if she had lost her mind, she kept muttering, "You're right, then let her die." Wanner must never be married off to those barbarians. Over the next few days, everything seemed perfectly normal. I continued my life of sleeping until I woke up naturally. I heard that the Xianbei prince died accidentally at the Red Pavilion, killed by a potent poison. I heard that the Empress was thrown into the cold palace, and that she had gone quite mad. The Emperor then issued a decree, canceling the order for Liu Ruyan to marry into the Xianbei. I had fully bribed the guards at the cold palace, and went to see the Empress. In just a few days, the Empress looked like a different person. Her hair was disheveled, her face was deathly pale, and it was terrifying to behold. She had lost all her spirit, just sitting there giggling blankly. I sat down beside her. After a while I asked, "Back then when you plotted to kill my biological mother, did you ever feel any remorse?" The Empress's eyes went wide as saucers, and she stared at me blankly for a moment before shaking her head violently. I didn't kill your mother. It was an accident. She fell into the lake by herself. I recall my mother nearly drowning as a child and falling deathly ill, so she never dared to go near the lake. I have made inquiries. You were the only one at Weiyang Lake that day, and it was your own maid who discovered my biological mother drowning. After you ascended to the position of Empress, that maid suddenly vanished. That surely couldn't be a coincidence. I spoke slowly, as if I were discussing someone else's affairs. The Empress's expression turned ferocious, as if she had suddenly realized something, and she let out a manic laugh. Then, pointing at me, she roared, "It was you, wasn't it? The betrothal of Wanner to the Xianbei prince. That was your doing too, wasn't it? Ha ha ha, I truly never imagined you could be this cunning. She laughed like a madwoman. Then she asked with a look of confusion, why were you so certain that I would sacrifice over 100 lives of my clan to be buried with that Xianbei prince, just to keep Wanner from being sent away? If I were a bit more ruthless, if I were ruthless like most people, even if Wanner had to die for the sake of the imperial family, it would have been a death for a worthy cause. I didn't even glance at the Empress. I stood up and said calmly, I have been by your side for many years. I understand you. You truly love the fourth sister with all your heart. As a mother, there is nothing you wouldn't do for her. Do you mean to say that even if I had told you the truth that night, you wouldn't have jumped into the fire pit anyway? The Empress heard this, and after a moment of silence, she fell directly to her knees before me, begging desperately, Qinger, I beg you. Wanner is your sister. She has no ill intentions toward you. Please spare her, will you? I beg of you. I admit it. I am the one who caused your mother's death. I was blinded by greed at the time. I wanted the position of Empress too badly, but Wanner is innocent. Spare her, and I will go to my death. I will pay for your mother's life with my own. How about that? I beg of you. I let out a long sigh. Remember this, I have not given you permission to die. Therefore, you are not allowed to die. I want you to stay in this cold palace and repent to my birth mother every single day. As for my fourth sister, hearing this, the Empress agreed without a second thought. I agree. I'll agree to everything you say. Just spare Wanner. I smiled faintly. My fourth sister and I grew up together. Naturally, I will protect her, so there is no need for you to worry. After saying this, I walked away, leaving the Empress behind me, laughing hysterically without pause. Oh, Zhao Yi, my dear Zhao Yi, you truly have given birth to a remarkable daughter. 7 months later, Liu Ruyan returned from Daxiangguo Temple. This time, she had taken the initiative to pray for the Empress Mother. One day, as I was resting in the palace, Liu Ruyan walked in with a look of utter dejection. Little sister, I want to hear you tell me a story. Liu Ruyan sat down beside me and naturally laid her head on my lap, curling her legs like a wounded little deer. Very well, I shall tell you the story of Snow White. I signaled for Foaling to withdraw and began to speak slowly. This fairy tale, known across the world, soon had Liu Ruyan completely mesmerized. I figured that, at the very least, it could allow her to momentarily forget the inner turmoil she felt. A few days later, there was another figure in white at Kunming Palace. Your Highness, the bargain we made should still hold, right? I spoke up. I would like to add one more condition. Actually, it's nothing difficult. What condition? Name it. I can agree to it on the Emperor's behalf. I've heard that Han Yusheng, the scholar of the capital, is brilliant in literature. From now on, let him enter the palace to be Liu Ruyan's study companion. Ji Qi clearly hadn't expected that I would make such a strange request, and he even looked visibly jealous. He knit his brows and asked, Your Highness, you haven't taken a fancy to Han Yusheng, have you? I chuckled. I have no interest in weak scholars. I prefer someone with a sturdier build like you. After saying that, I pointed to the paper on the table nearby, which contained the secret formula and ratios for black powder. I even kindly warned him. This stuff doesn't show mercy to anyone. Be careful not to blow yourself up. Ji Qi smiled with gentlemanly tenderness. By this time next year, Your Highness will be able to move out of the palace and into the princess's residence. I'll be waiting for you to marry me. Hump, quite the smooth talker, aren't you? I lay on the rocking chair, swinging my legs back and forth, with little dimples forming on my cheeks. We'll see, depending on my mood then.